next, we have our very own Professor Amitav Malik, a distinguished scientist and a thought leader who is very eager to talk about why this conference is crucial than ever. Professor Malik, a Padma Shri awardee, was a key figure in advancing India's indigenous laser technology and led the establishment of Laser Science and Technology Center under DRDO. Today, he serves as a conference convener, founding trustee of Pune International Center, and head of our very own Energy, Environment and Climate Change Cell, where he spearheads climate resilience and sustainability initiatives. I now invite Professor Amitav Malik to share his insights on why the Climate Emergency Conference.
Namaskar and greetings of the Women's International Day or International Day for Women. So let me add 2 words to Dr. Mashilkar. Half the population of this world has been neglected so far. We are only now waking up to realize, my God, what a loss, what injustice. So I hope this is the beginning of a change. Very similar is the story of the climate change. Our generation, I think most of us, somewhere near 80 plus, I don't remember drinking water from bottle, buying water. Huh? And this is only 70 years ago, 60 years ago. How many things have changed? Which means what? Which means we did not care, and therefore things have changed. Or somebody else cared for something else. That also is a reason. So climate change, global warming, is that kind of a story. If you don't mind, I'll sit down and continue here. If you recall, most of us old enough will recall that our first conference of parties summit meeting on the global warming and climate change was in 1991 in Rio, Brazil. I was that time in Washington, and so I was also kind of involved. But a lot of promises came up, a lot of enthusiasm came out, a lot of air travels gave out additional CO2 in the atmosphere. Having said that, the aim set by the first Rio summit was to contain CO2 increase and reduce it to 30% by 2011, 10 years from 1991. We all know nothing of that sort happened, and it is going on increasing. So obviously, the question comes, why? I think maybe most of us have heard of it and know of it, but for the record, let me say that burning fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas, whatever, has been the norm. Infrastructure has been set, and therefore, there is a major force, if I may call, for people to not move away from that comfort zone. Everything is going on very well. Why are you complaining? That is how global warming and climate change have started happening. In fact, if I recall, it was the fear of global warming that preceded the fear of climate catastrophe. But in the new millennium, 2001, we started feeling that climate is changing. And now we are come to a stage where I, as a climate activist, PIC as a very conscientious, independent think tank, have agreed to call a conference on climate emergency. Is this on online? Projection is on? No. So I'm not following the net meeting, but I will use the PPT more for my own continuity. The fossil fuel burning has been growing exponentially. It's an industry. It was making money. It was creating huge dependence of the entire population of the world on fossil fuel. They are justified in their own objective. They were aware, now of course the documents are coming out, that by 1955 and 1960, Exxon and others their scientists were also working. They were worried about the court cases that might happen. So they were extremely aware that this is going to lead into an unacceptable situation where the global warming and climate change will be so badly affected that people might sue them. That is happening. Now, of course, it's a long time since all that started. Greta Thunberg happened. A girl of hardly 15 who understood that her future is gone. There are many young people in India today, they are understanding that what's happening. There is nothing. No, there will be no job, no opportunity, no nothing. It will be just a struggle for existence. Yesterday we held a student mela, kind of climate mela, we call it You Can, because we wanted to inculcate in the students, college students, school students, the awareness that you yourself can make a difference. We cannot hold the governments, we cannot hold the leaders. We have to hold ourselves responsible, because it is we, the people, who select the leaders, who select the government, and so on and so forth. What does climate emergency mean? Why are we calling it? Emergency means that we are heading for things that are much worse than today. What's worse than today? More of the climate extremes, more of the climate uncertainty, weather uncertainties. So I had invited my colleague, Dr. Krishnan, to relate weather and climate. I think, is there already? No, there you go. So he's going to do that for us and understand that how day-to-day life, which we call weather, is getting affected by climate, which is a long-term perspective. We are in the process of what we have not done so far. Accumulated CO2 or greenhouse gases have totaled to something like over 580 gigaton in the atmosphere. We are talking about, not we, the Western countries are talking about technology solutions. Yes, of course, technology solutions are there and they will improve. But the scale of it is so large. The cost of it will be so large. It's almost like being unviable. So that is where the reason why we are talking about climate emergency. There is a need for comprehensive emission mapping. We know that we are the third largest GHG emission. China, which was the second, has now become the topmost. USA is number 2. Russia has remained on number 4. But if you see the differences in number 1, number 2, and number 3, major differences. We are only 7% of the total responsibility. Having said that, given our population, I'm afraid slowly we may become the second largest polluter. The invisible GHG polluter. I'm not talking about visible pollution. They are two different things. They both are injurious, both are dangerous, both need to be controlled. But right now, what we are talking about is global warming and climate change, which is largely due to greenhouse gases trapped in the atmosphere. We very easily say that climate change and global warming are universal, global. So they are not partial, they are totally impartial. And at one point, I myself was saying that this can emerge as a global equalizer. Everything will be hurt, and therefore there will be some kind of sharing of the misery, sharing of the problems. Further study shows that the really wealthy Western countries are already gearing up to 2100, year 2100, so that they can live more or less the same pattern of life for another 70 years, or whatever it is. And by that time, they are also hoping that technology will make tremendous jumps. They are also hoping that today we are talking about one planet, one chance. They are looking at planet 2, possible. Given the humankind innovative capacity and the humankind reach of thought, anything is possible. And yet, unless there is action, unless there is momentum, nothing much happens. That's the tragedy of the climate change and global warming. Another interesting aspect is why there is no action. Not that action is very difficult, not that action is very expensive. They are all there, but just not happening. Why? Because urgency is not being felt. And somebody will accuse me of being antisocial or activist. Actually, we have become victims of what is called next quarter profit. Everything is decided by the next quarter profit by the corporate. But then who is causing it? People, society. So unless we get rid of this next quarter profit syndrome, how are we going to think beyond it? That is the reason there is no action yet. There is no action yet can also be translated into there is not enough momentum for feel the pinch. The political leaders or decision makers are yet not understanding that the cost of no action will be multiple times the cost of action. When it is related to cost, maybe some sense will emerge. Today, there are numbers, figures all over in all documents. They are saying roughly cost of not doing enough in the next 2 years, we are already in 2025, will cost 7 times the cost of damage by 2030. Today's cost of damage is already calculated, I don't remember it offhand, but that will be multiplied by whatever number, and the cost of not doing will be 7 times more than the cost that will be there anyway. Some damage will be there. The people are talking about loss and damage. That's accepted. But the scale of and cost, that is going to be very different. There are many things I don't know. The purpose of this climate emergency conference is to make us think But ultimately, it is the modern society capable of innovative thinking, capable of actually making a difference, that has to become active and proactive. And whatever we are doing in this so-called conference is actually to not only provide directions, not only provide pathways, but also do what you can in your own surrounding, in your own city, in your own country, and so on and so forth. In 2012, we held a conference, first conference, on energy, environment, and national security. Dr. Kalam had come from Delhi, and he said to me, because he was my boss and senior, so like Dr. Mashalkar also tells me so many wonderful guideline things. He said, Amitav, you want to do something which is obvious, your intentions are good, but then you don't go on advising people. What you want people to do, make it happen in your city. That was the beginning of PIC taking up a flagship project on making PMR net carbon neutral by 2030. Because by 2018, IPCC had already announced that whatever we can do in the decade of 2020 to 2030 will decide what we will be doing in 2100. That was a kind of very well-researched, well-studied, well-analyzed assessment. We followed. In PIC, we took up that project. In fact, industry got interested. We got little funding from them also. And we created a TechFin study, as we call it, technology financial study, feasibility study of many pages, 200 odd pages, to show, to prove on paper that the carbon signature of the PMR by 2030 can be less than what it was in 2020. So we are not going the emission curve. And Dr. Mashalkar mentioned that. That exists, that is being read by many across the world. I get a feedback because I'm the author. It's very heartening to know that people are really looking at understanding that unless you do your thing in your environment, why should anybody bother about it? So we have to do in our own environment what we can do. The problem is global, of course. Fortunately, solutions are all local. And when local things come together, that becomes the global solution. It is that kind of scenario that we are talking about. How do we manage the impending threat? So it's a question of vulnerability. I hope most of you know that we are one of the very vulnerable country because of our geography, because of our population, because of our inability of having adequate infrastructure. We are 7th vulnerable in the world. So therefore, we can't wait for the rest of the world to wake up and start working. And that is why we are trying to make a difference as much as possible for India to begin with. And here, I think most of you know that basically I'm a defense scientist involved in national security for many years. So naturally, by instinct, I go back to my originals. And I understand that as the global warming and climate change becomes more aggravated, the societal tensions will increase. The intergovernmental tensions will increase. International tensions will increase. Climate migration itself will create havoc. It will become a national security issue. Inevitable. And therefore, we have to enable ourselves so that our national security is not compromised because of some natural disaster, some other thing. Natural disaster I'm saying because most people understand that natural disaster can affect national security. But it is that kind of a thing that we are building into it. So it is not a natural disaster. It is a kind of a disaster that man-made and man-developed that is building up, and we are not able to do much. Fortunately for Maharashtra, there was a time when we had a very young environmental minister, Ajit Thackeray. And when we were doing all that, he was the minister. But then politics being what it is, nothing stays constant and things change. But we can't let that happen. We have to maintain momentum. That is a responsibility of the like-minded people who are thinking. Yesterday, I'm happy to share with you, more than 500 school children participate in debate and competition and essays and all that. My God, they are width of imagination. They are an understanding of the future. I get filled up. Amazing. And it is this kind of kids who are going to face havoc. Who is responsible? Our generation. Maybe not in India so much, but all over. And this will happen to everybody. My granddaughter is 13, my grandson is 17. They are in USA. They'll face the same problem. So what are we doing? At this age, I think we can try to change as much as possible. I think I'm meandering, so I don't know what I'm saying. But there are so many things. I will share this PPT. But then humanity is indeed at a turning point. And it's not just a turning point, it's a tipping point. Environmental tipping points are those where the environmental parameters change to such an extent that they go into a regenerative feedback mode. And when that happens, things that are getting worse, they automatically get even more worse. People's intervention, human intervention, becomes less and less effective. We are getting into all this slowly and steadily. IPCC has documented all this into a number of tipping points that are going to be crossed. We have already crossed some 5 or 6 major tipping points. For instance, I think Dr. Mashelkar mentioned that there are many changes that are happening. For instance, take the polar region, Arctic or Antarctic. Arctic is heated up already by 4 times. Arctic is already melting to the extent that nations are looking for waterways for transport. Antarctic is being cleaved, and at the rate that Antarctic is falling out, and it might happen any day without anybody's notice, the sea level rise would be in terms of meters, not in just centimeters. Bangladesh is, and even West Bengal, the Bay of Bengal is heating up at 3 degrees per year instead of 2 degrees per year. Because wherever there is a containment of water, that heating is coming cumulative. So every geography, every place, every situation is going to get aggravated in terms of being human friendly. What we took for granted in our childhood, we never bothered. But now, all those things are now becoming inevitable. So the parts of the earth that will become uninhabitable will go on increasing to the extent that habitable portions will become very rare, and there will be tension, there will be migration. This is the situation that seems almost inevitable in the next 25 years. In the next 25 years, God forbid, either we act on things or we perish. That is the situation we are talking about. Once again, I'm deviating from what is there on the thing. But fortunately today, not fortunately, but luckily, today the economy is getting hurt because of the climate change. Not just because there are losses, but the whole functioning of economy has been affected by the way the nature is responding. And we are very lucky to have somebody like Dr. Ranade here with us, who will tell us more. So I will not get into it. But we know that every industry is going to lose out on productivity, on what they are measuring today as the GDP. What they are measuring today as the GDP by itself is wrong. It is not measuring any progress. It is not measuring any happiness. It is not measuring any real gain to the environment or to the earth or to the humanity. It is only measuring monetary transfer between nations in terms of making business. I'm sorry. So I think we are measuring the wrong things. PIC is going to put a very strong paper on shifting to green GDP. This has been going on for the last 5-7 years, but I think high time that somebody has to take the bull by the horn, and we hope to do that in the next few years. Cost of inaction I've already talked about. Humanity. Okay. Possible solutions? First of all, we need to recognize the threat. We need to understand the cause of the threat. It's a threat which is slowly building, invisibly building, without warning, without any fanfare, and then you suddenly know, oh my God, my neighborhood, water level has increased. Suddenly, Miami realized last year that there were potholes. It's not potholes, what do you call? The drainage holes. Instead of draining water of the city into the sea, it is flowing water from the sea into the city. Miami sea face was supposed to be a prime property. Nobody is buying any property there. No insurance company is willing to give insurance cover. It is that kind of loss that all Western countries, all affluent countries are now feeling the pinch. And therefore, when the affluent countries feel the pinch, things start changing, I hope. But it's too late. I told you that by IPCC calculation, 1 meter rise in sea level per decade looks like inevitable from within next 20-30 years for next 100 years. Which means we will definitely lose coastal areas, coastal cities. At what point will we wake up? We means the global community. If they have not yet woken up, I'm sure they will sometimes wake up in parts, in sections, and that will be the turning point. So we as the 7th vulnerable nation in the world, we have to understand that we cannot afford to wait for others to do anything else. We cannot afford to wait for politicians to change their mind. We need to understand the changes within us, changes within our thinking. Once the thinking changes, I'll take one more minute to share. In Pune, in 2005, there was a legislation by the government of Maharashtra that hill slopes, in Pune there are lots of hill slopes, that hill slopes will not be allowed for new construction anymore. Do you know? The hill slopes have become the prime construction areas. There are many hill slopes which now have 20-story buildings. And guess what? They are 20-story because the top story, which is most expensive, gets sold first. Who's responsible? The builder or the people who are buying? So it's the mindset change that is required. Unless that happens, same thing, same story will go on. So we are talking about doing something very difficult in anticipation of something becoming even more difficult. That's not human nature. We have to modify human nature as well. I think I have said enough, and I don't think this is a forum for question and answer, but if there is any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the importance and setting the background for the context.